Welcome to week 6 of Wake Up Productive. For the first 4 weeks of Wake Up Productive, we focused on the inner game of productivity. And now in this next 4 weeks, we're working on the outer game of productivity. Last week, which was the first week of this next 4-part outer game series, we started with the 60-60-30 solution. So hopefully by now, you've gotten your timer, you've integrated the 60-60-30 solution into the beginning of your workday, and you're spending the two 50-minute chunks at the beginning of your day on your biggest opportunity. In this section, we're going to drill down a little bit deeper and talk about how to create routines and rituals that really work. I'd like to talk to one of the ideas that we discussed earlier in Wake Up Productive, which is the idea that we are creatures of habit, whether we want to admit it or not. Now, a lot of us don't want to be creatures of habit, and we don't want to see ourselves as creatures of habit. We don't want to think of ourselves as boring, predictable people who are apathetic and just do and say and think and feel the same things over and over and over. But the bottom line is we are, and that's the way that it is for most of us. 99% of the things that you thought and felt and said today are the same things that you thought and felt and said yesterday, maybe in a slightly different order, but it's essentially the same stuff. And we wind up getting into habitual patterns of what we do, say, and feel, typically because we're just following the path of least resistance. As Robert Fritz talks about in his book, The Path of Least Resistance, a cow walking through a field and over a hill takes a particular route because it's the easiest route to take. And then through the years, cows follow that same route and they make a cow path. And then eventually some Europeans come over and they pave those cow paths and you get the streets of Boston. And that's actually how the streets were created. And that's what a lot of us do, is we just take the path of least resistance through life and we kind of make that cow path and then we pave over it, and that becomes our habit. And we have physical habits, movement habits, we have emotional habit patterns, triggers and responses, and we have mental habit patterns, and there's even a physical process that happens that makes our mind kind of pave these neural pathways. It's the myelination process. So we fall into these habits as humans, and what we're trying to do is figure out how to make those habits positive habits. Now, what a lot of us do, and I think this is a mistake, unfortunately, is we think, well, I got to learn a new way to do things, and then I've got to remember to do it when the time is right. Okay, and we say, we make a mistake, and we go, oh, I forgot to do the thing that I needed to do. Like, let's say the 60-60-30 solution. We'll go all week, and we'll get to the end of the week, and we'll realize that we didn't feel productive, and we'll go, oh, I forgot to do the 60-60-30 solution. Forgot to do it this week, and that's why I don't feel productive. I'm going to have to remember to do it next week. Well, remembering to do it when you need it is a losing game. We never remember to do it when we need to do it. What we need to do is we need to install it. We need to practice it. We need to create a conscious routine and then practice it over and over and over until it becomes a ritual or becomes a habit that we do automatically. That's the way to really get ourselves to do things. So if we can mature, enough in the moment, right, to be conscious and accept, all right, I am a creature of habit. The things that I do and feel and say and think every day are pretty much the same things that I do and say and feel, in the same patterns that I did yesterday and a week and a month and a year before. Well, maybe I could wake up for a moment and say, I need to make it so that a year from now, when I look back and I say, yep, the things that I did today are pretty much the same things that I did yesterday and pretty much the same things that I did yesterday, that it's all great stuff, that it's all stuff that feels really, really good to do. Here's a little paradox. Sometimes I'll say to someone, well, structure your time in 60-60-30 chunks and routinize or ritualize the most important processes in your life so that you make sure that you do them every single day, or if they're less often, you do them every single week. But mostly, if it's the most important thing in your life, you should be doing it every single day, and do it at first thing. Do it at the beginning of the day. That's why we do the personal success ritual, the personal strength ritual first thing, to make ourselves strong and clear. And then we come to work and we spend the first two chunks, right, the first two 50-minute chunks, the first two 60-minute chunks, focused on our highest value activity, we do that to get the most leverage. That's where the most value is, right? That just makes sense. So if I say to someone, you need to do these things, they'll say, well, I don't want to like have to do that thing every day. I don't want to feel like, I must do that one thing. And then I always say, well, if it's the most important thing in your life that gets you the most results, then why wouldn't you want to? And typically, at the bottom of it, and this is the way it was for me, I fought this for years, literally, it was I didn't want to feel like I was a creature of habit. I didn't want to admit it to myself. So when you wake up and you have awareness, right? Carl Jung and Carl Rogers, great psychologists, great theoretical thinkers in the area of human psychology and behavior, they both said something to the effect, you must accept something before you can change it. And so if we accept that we're creatures of habit, and we accept that we're probably going to do the same things tomorrow that we did today, and which are the same things we did yesterday, and that it really is important to do the most important things in our life, then we will put the rituals in place, and we'll do them every day for 30 days, or 60 days, or 90 days, until it just becomes natural, until we feel pulled to it, and then we'll wake up in our future and we'll feel productive. Okay, so that's the theoretical basis behind why we want to create routines and rituals. So we just wake up and we feel pulled to them, and we really do the most important things in our life. Now you remember from an earlier session that I talked about habit gravity and escape velocity. And you'll remember that habit gravity is when you start a new ritual or you start a new routine, that every part of you will feel like it wants to avoid doing it in the beginning, because it's uncomfortable, it's new, it's different, it's weird. Other people may not like it, and you might get disapproval from them, or judgment, or embarrassment, or all this kind of stuff. So we have to fight that gravity that's holding us in place to reach escape velocity. Right? That's why we really focus on that first 10 days, that first 20 days to make sure it gets done. We put things like accountability and rewards and penalties in place just for that one period of time. Very, very important. Well, another element that I mentioned earlier, but we're going to dig into right now, is the idea that if you want to create a successful new routine that turns into a successful ritual or habit, you need to plan it in detail. Now, this is one of the most important lessons that I've learned from Tony Schwartz, who wrote The Power of Full Engagement, and who's just a very, very brilliant guy in the area of energy creation and management. And he says that one of the key aspects of creating a successful ritual, in fact, it's essentially mandatory, is detailed planning of that ritual. Actually architecting the whole thing, right? Organizing all the different chunks, seeing how they're going to work in advance, putting them together, and then going through them and making sure that they all fit. And when you think about it, it only makes sense, right? If this is something that's important enough to do every day, theoretically for years or maybe for the rest of your life, it's probably worth taking a little bit of time early on to design the ideal routine. You may have heard me talk about the example before of the company UPS, right? United Parcel Service. They have a system where each of their drivers that drives a UPS truck learns the optimal way to do all of the different things that they need to do, right? So they plan which foot to step into the truck with first, which hand puts the key into the ignition and turns it on, all of these different things to completely optimize. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take each of the important rituals in your life and you're going to want to plan them out in detail. Right? You're going to keep hearing me talk about this. You need to plan those rituals out. And when you plan it out, it really starts out as a little routine. It's a set of steps. And then you rehearse it and you do it over and over in your mind and in reality, and you figure out how to fit it all together, and then you do it consistently. That's when it really becomes more of a ritual or a positive habit, where it just happens on its own and you feel naturally pulled to doing it. Now, just like anything else, if you learn a new game, or you learn a new sport, or something I've been getting into over the last year or so is yoga to stretch and strengthen my body. When you start, it feels really awkward and you feel weird. A lot of people give up during that initial phase. You do not want to give up during that phase. You want to encourage yourself, you know what, 30 days from now, this is going to feel totally natural. It's going to feel totally normal. You heard me talk in one of the earlier sessions about, one of the things I've started doing over the last several months as I make this program is using a neti pot, which is kind of a nasal or a sinus cleaner. Well, pouring water up my nose when I started it, that was not a very natural thing. And the first several times I did it, I really was like, there's almost no way that this could ever become comfortable. Well, now I'm to the point where it doesn't matter anymore. It's very natural, it's very normal, and it just kind of happens. It's part of my day, and I don't have all those responses. Whatever you're doing as a new ritual, as a new routine, is going to feel that way at first. So, key point, you need to plan the ritual out. You need to plan the routine out. You need to put all the steps in place. Then you need to imagine them. You need to think about how they're going to fit together, how they're going to, kind of connect to each other. And then you need to do them. You need to practice them in the real world. And after 30 days, that's when it will all start to come together, right? After you've escaped the habit gravity with escape velocity. Now, one of the elements to creating positive, successful routines and rituals in your life and making them into positive habits, something that's overlooked, and again, it's not easy to see, it's counterintuitive in a lot of cases, is that it's the little things, the transitions that often trip us up and stop us. So, as an example, getting started. Let's say that you plan to start going to the gym, right? Which is an example that we talked about earlier. And you wake up and you say, okay, I'm going to start going to the gym today. Well, if you don't have a buffer period there, right? An on-ramp period where you are going to prepare to go to the gym, where you go figure out where your shoes are and you get your towel and you find the keys and whatever it is, you get that extra period so that that transition is nice and smooth. You might wind up getting so close to the time that when you decide, okay, time to leave, and then you got to go find all that stuff, that little transition is what stops you, right? You can't find your shoes, you can't find your keys, and you go, you know what, I'm just going to bag it for today, I'll go tomorrow. So figuring out the transitions is critical, all right? And I recommend that you always have at least a 15-minute on-ramp and off-ramp to each new routine that you're trying, right? 15 minutes before it that you leave as buffer time to find your materials, to get yourself mentally psyched up, to kind of come out of whatever else you were doing, and then 15 minutes to reintegrate into the rest of your life so that, when you stop, if there are a couple of emergency things that you'd forgotten about and you're anxious you got to go do them, or something that's calling your attention, you just kind of have a little bit of time to reintegrate into your life. So the on-ramp, the on-off ramp, and the transitions, very, very, very important. We'll be talking more about these in the future, but they're kind of critical as we do this exercise that we're about to do. So hopefully you have been doing a 60-60-30 every day for the last week in your work environment. What I'd like to do now is drill down into one of those 60s and actually into the 50-minute focus chunk and really plan a ritual that really, really works. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do an exercise. So get out a blank sheet of paper. All the exercises here are very simple, and they just involve a pen and paper. That's the most sophisticated technological tool that you're going to need. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to take a moment and write out all of the key steps to getting yourself to create great results within a 50-minute chunk of time. All right, now focused on your biggest opportunity, whatever that biggest opportunity is at work, that thing that builds your company the most, brings in new customers, rings the cash register, whatever your highest leverage activity is. So what is it that you would do? Let me give you an example from my own life. In my business, the highest leverage that I get is typically from creating marketing and content. You can think of what I'm creating right now as content. I'm creating the video for a product called Wake Up Productive. This is very, very high leverage work for me because I'll make this program, I will record it, and then we'll be able to duplicate it and reproduce it, and hopefully a lot of people will benefit from it. Now, what does it take to make a video product like this, make it so that something like this works? Well, when it started out, when we would shoot video, we would come in and we'd try to be figuring out how to set up the lights, and sometimes it would take hours just to set up one light. And then we'd figure out which camera we were going to use. Well, does this one look better? Does that one look better? And it was a little bit messy. Well, now when I come to shoot video like I'm doing right now, I walk into the room, everything's set, the lights are set, the camera's set, and we press go, and it might take 10 minutes of preparation time, whereas, on average, whereas in the past it would take 2 hours of preparation time. That didn't all happen by accident. It happened because we sat down and we said, okay, this is something that we need to create a ritual around. We need to create a set of habits of behavior and preparation so that when it's time to shoot some video, everything is just handled. So now there's a ritual that we have where the camera is set up, the lights are turned on. I have a ritual where I go to my computer and I've got some formats and some outlines for creating the content, and I do that in my 50-minute chunks of time, and it all works very smoothly like clockwork. It wouldn't have happened that way had I not realized, this is something that I'm going to want to do long term, and I hadn't broken it down into chunks and had others on my team help break it down into chunks and really thought it through, right? Gone down to the granular level and wired the whole thing together. Let's say, for example, that for you, making outbound phone calls to build new relationships with partners who could sell your product. Let's say that's the highest leverage in your business, which it's the highest leverage in a lot of businesses. What do you need to have in place? What needs to all be right there so that when you launch into one of those 50-minute sessions of making outbound calls to get people to work with you, what needs to be there so that you don't have any distractions, you don't have any interruptions, you don't have any friction? So take a moment right now and make a list of all the things that need to be in place so that you can focus 50 minutes, and ideally 50 minutes and then another 50 minutes, on the biggest opportunity inside of your business. What are all the conditions that need to be in place? What are all the things that you need to do? And how does it all need to kind of work? What are all the individual chunks? So go ahead and pause the video now and make that list of all of the pieces of the puzzle that need to be in place. Go ahead and do that now, and when you're finished making your list, then come back and turn the video back on. Okay, so now that you have your list of components, you're going to want to get another piece of paper out, and you're going to want to flow chart or organize these different components. Some of them are conditions that need to be met, things that you just need to do once to set it up, like maybe you need to get a headset so that you can make better calls, make them more efficiently. And some of the things that you're going to need to do are going to be part of the system every single day. So put the things that are conditions you need to set in one list, and then flow chart out the other steps. So, let's say you draw a box and it says, number 1, turn off email, turn off cell phone, turn off anything that has an on or off switch, and close my office door so that no one interrupts me. That might be step 1. Step 2 might be pull up database of leads in salesforce.com so that I can see who my high priority lead partners are, and I can figure out who I need to call next. Step number 3, call the most important prospect. Step 4, call the second most important prospect. I think you see where I'm going with this. Flow chart the process so you can see exactly what you need to do, and pay specific attention to the transitions, where you transition from one thing to another. Because what you'll find is that, let's say the first thing on your list, the first thing that you do is you eliminate distraction and interruption, which I highly recommend that you do. You might find that in the process of shutting down your email, you spend 25 minutes emailing people and you get stuck there. The transitions where you're between things, this is where there's a lot of friction, where we lose a lot of energy. So you want to fit those together in your flow chart, and then when you implement your process, you're going to want to start the beginning of each of them by imagining it successful in your mind. I learned from Roy Williams, who's the guy that wrote The Wizard of Ads, very brilliant thinker. He said that we only do things that we've first seen ourselves doing in our mind. So you got to see yourself doing it successfully in your mind. So sit down, close your eyes, and imagine your process. After you've flowcharted it and after you've thought through all the transitions, then imagine how it's going to work and rehearse it in your mind. And if you want extra credit, every day when you sit down to start your new routine that you're turning into a ritual, stop for a moment, close your eyes, and imagine doing it perfectly. Imagine going through all the steps so that when you open your eyes, you're ready, and you actually go do all the steps and you see where you went wrong. Now, next, over the next week or 2 or 3, as you're doing your ritual, you're going to see these little sticking points. That's why we want to leave some time for the on-ramp and the off-ramp, because in the middle, you're going to drop the ball here and there, you're going to get distracted, you're going to notice this stuff. This is the opportunity to fine-tune this process and this ritual. So we want to chunk it down into the component parts. We want to set up the conditions, we want to flowchart the process, and then we want to see ourselves doing the ideal ritual, and then just continually optimize and tweak and tune and make sure and get all those transition points. And when you find yourself in the real world as you're doing your ritual, when you find yourself getting stuck on one over and over and over, stop and really figure out how to remove it. Don't get into the habit of doing something the wrong way. Don't get into the habit of getting a sticking point. And you might need to make some big structural change to it. You may need to find that you can't make the calls in this one room because you just keep getting interrupted. Or you might find that you have to take the glass door off your office and put a wooden door up, with a sign on it that says, do not disturb for those chunks of time when you're doing your prospecting, whatever it is. You may find some structural piece. Whatever you need to do, put the pieces in place to support not having friction and interruption and distraction, and then work on all the transitions so that you've got very smooth transitions. We're going to talk about some more advanced techniques for doing this in the future, but for now, you're just going to take that one high leverage activity, you're going to plan that routine that you're going to do every day at the beginning of your day in your 60-60-30 that hopefully you've already been doing, but we're going to take it to that next level of granularity. You're going to write out all the pieces, which you've already done now. You're going to fit them all together into a flow chart. Then you're going to mentally rehearse them, and you're going to create a routine that really yields you high leverage, and you're just going to keep tweaking it and tuning it. So for this week, we're going to continue with our 60-60-30 at the beginning of the day, but what we're going to do is we're going to take that 50-minute chunk, those two 50-minute chunks ideally, that are working on your biggest opportunity, that are going to focus on taking advantage of your highest leverage, and we're going to really drill down. We're really going to figure out and kind of finely tune and smith those things together so that it works as one process, right? You don't get tripped up. So take this week, really plan out in detail this routine or this ritual, and execute it every day and make it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And keep doing your 60-60-30. Very important, right? It's probably still a little bit weird for you. You don't know how it's going to fit in the long term or whether this is going to work, but stick with it and really get a lot of leverage focus on those 50-minute chunks with your high leverage activity, and really focus on working 50 minutes and 50 minutes in that new routine that you're designing right now, and very specifically getting all the supporting material in place, just really working on it. And then we're going to come back next week and we're going to take this even to the next level. All right, so take your list, design your flow chart, create your ritual, see yourself doing it in your mind, and start doing it in those two first chunks of the day every single day. And I'll talk to you again next week.